Hi class, it's Amanda, and for my assignment this week, I have the Articles of Incorporation of Krispy Kreme Donuts. And first it states that these Articles of Incorporation are under the laws of the state of North Carolina. So the first thing I did was went over to Westlaw and went to North Carolina. And I actually had to search for the statute because when I searched just Articles of Incorporation, it was everything that came up had to do with amending the articles, so it didn't really help me find the exact statute. So this will kind of give me an idea of what is expected within the state of North Carolina. So 55-2-02 says the Articles of Incorporation must set forth, number one, a corporate name for the corporation that satisfies the requirements of GS 55D-20 and 55D-21. So we're going to go over to D-20 first, which states the name of a corporation must contain the word corporation, incorporated, company, or limited. So ours is Krispy Kreme Donuts Incorporated, and they have that as Article 1, the name of the corporation. Okay, and this is talking about limited liability companies, which doesn't apply to us. Limited partnership, LLP. So none of the other ones here apply to incorporations. But I am going to go over here to 55D-21, entity names on the records of Secretary of State. So the following entities are subject to the section: corporations, nonprofit, limited liability, limited partnership. Okay, foreign corporations, foreign nonprofit. So B states, except as authorized by subsection C, the name of an entity subject to this section, the name of a domestic corporation, just names all the companies, a name reserved or registered under 55D-23 or 55D-24. And this is just stating it can't be a reserved name, and this is just stating that it can't be a name that's already registered to another company. So I'm going to type in search North Carolina corporations, and it takes me to Secretary of State business registration search. Company starting with Krispy Kreme, and ours is Krispy Kreme Incorporated. Well, it looks like there's a lot of Krispy Kremes. Foundation, Management, LLC, Incorporated, Equity Group. They all belong to the same company, I would assume, based on the spelling. But all of these, yeah, because they're all registered within the state of North Carolina. So Article 2 is talking about the period of duration. So, and they kind of don't go in order, I've noticed. So I'm going to go back over to Westlaw, and number 2 states the number of shares the corporation is authorized to issue and any other information required by GS 55-6-01. So we have to make sure that they list the number of shares. that would take us down to Article 4, and it states a corporation shall have the authority to issue not more than A, 100 million shares of common stock, no par value, and B, 10 million shares of preferred stock, no par value. Holders of the common stock are entitled to the entire voting power. All distributions declared in assets of the corporation upon dissolution, subject to the rights and preferences, if any, of the holders of preferred stock to such voting powers. Dividends and assets. The board of directors. I'm just skimming through, so I'm not reading this whole thing because it's kind of long. And I'm just hitting on the important parts for this presentation. So here we see that it stated the amount of shares, which I believe the number of shares the corporation is authorized to issue, and 55-6-01 states it must prescribe the classes of shares, the number. Down here, it must be given a distinguishing designation. Articles of incorporation must authorize one or more classes that have unlimited voting rights, one or more class of shares that are together entitled to receive the net assets. So I saw here where it talked about voting power, all distributions declared and all assets of the corporation upon dissolution go to holders of the common stock, and that's who is in charge of voting as well. And then it says it may authorize one or more classes that have special or limited voting rights. So this is not something that has to be there. C has to be there because it says it must authorize these two things, which we see here that it authorizes the amount and it sets out the distinction between the certain types of people. Here it gives you the distinction between the board of directors versus the holders of the common stock, and it also states the authority of the board of directors. So back to the statute, it says here the street address, mailing address, if different, of the registered office, the county it's registered in, and the name of the registered agent. So the initial registered office of the corporation, here's the address in North Carolina, and the initial registered agent at such address is Stephen A. Johnson. So this section takes care of number 3. The address, okay, also of the principal's office, if it's different, or if any, and where it's located, and the name and address of each incorporator. So we have, it said if any, so if there's not a separate place, then there wouldn't be another address. But here we have the name and address of the incorporator. Ours follows Stephen A. Johnson, which we just saw above, and it states his address here. So all of A so far has checked out as far as everything that needs to be included in the state of North Carolina is included in these. Excuse me. B states the articles of incorporation may set forth any provision under this chapter is required to be set forth in the bylaws. Name and addresses, provision not inconsistent. But that says may, and that's determined by what is required to be set forth in the bylaws, and that doesn't really apply to this article here. The articles of incorporation. So I'm going to skim through and make sure. Okay, C says the articles of incorporation need not set forth any of the corporate powers and file to the effect conversion of any other business entity pursuant to 11A, which gives me a link here, shall also include the requirements required by this other statute, and it's not a converting entity because this is actually the original Krispy Kreme Incorporated. So let me make sure though that it doesn't say anything specifically about converting entities. And if that just sounded weird, I actually paused this so I could scroll through, because as you can see, this is actually fairly long and in-depth article of incorporation. Now I wanted to make sure that it didn't include, what did they call it over here? A converting entity, which it said nothing about that. It just stated, more in detail what's expected, what authority the board of directors has, things like that, and all of that has already been covered as far as making sure that everything for the state of North Carolina is included within these articles of incorporation. So that was my presentation. I hope it made sense and you learned something, and I think I covered everything.